You won't believe what happened when Karen called the cops on me just because of my generator. But here's the twist: she had no idea it wasn't just any generator. It's actually a FEMA emergency backup system. Yep, the kind of equipment designed to help during power outages and emergencies. So why was she so quick to complain? And why did the police even show up? This whole thing blew up faster than I ever expected. Let me take you back to that day. The power went out in my neighborhood, and I was just trying to stay safe and keep things running smoothly at home. I fired up my generator, which I've had for emergencies, nothing unusual about it. But then, out of nowhere, Karen, my next-door neighbor, starts making a huge fuss. She said it was too loud and disturbing the peace, and before I knew it, she called the cops on me. The tension between us was already high, but this incident took it to another level. What Karen didn't realize is that this wasn't just some noisy machine. It's an official FEMA-approved system, meant to help during exactly these kinds of situations. So what happened when the cops arrived? And how did I explain all this? Stick around, because this story is far from over. So, here's the backstory that really sets the stage. My generator isn't just some random purchase. It's part of an emergency backup system that FEMA recommends for situations like this. When storms hit or the grid fails, having a reliable power source can mean the difference between staying safe and dealing with chaos. I made sure to get one that's quiet, efficient, and officially approved, so I never thought it would cause any trouble. But Karen apparently saw it differently. She's the type of neighbor who always has something to say, always ready to complain about noise or anything she thinks is disruptive. I've tried talking to her before, but it never really goes anywhere. She just doesn't want to listen. This time felt different, though. It wasn't just a casual complaint. It escalated to police involvement, which caught me off guard. I was honestly worried about how things would go down when the officers showed up. Would they understand the situation? Would they side with Karen just because she called? The whole neighborhood was watching too, and you could feel the tension in the air. Everyone's got opinions about what's right or wrong when it comes to noise and safety, but no one seemed to know the full story about the generator's purpose or how important it was for emergencies. That misunderstanding made everything worse. I kept wondering, how could something meant to protect us become such a problem? And what would the police decide once they found out the truth? I'm about to tell you exactly what happened next, but trust me, this story is far from simple. When the cops finally arrived, I could feel my heart racing. I wasn't sure if they'd understand the situation or just see me as some noisy troublemaker. Karen was already there, arms crossed, looking like she was ready to get me in trouble. From her side, it seemed like the generator was just an annoyance, a loud, unnecessary disturbance in a quiet neighborhood. But from my side, this generator wasn't about convenience, it was about safety. It was my emergency backup, the one thing keeping my family comfortable and connected while the power was out. As the officers started asking questions, I tried to explain that this was a FEMA-approved emergency system. I told them how important it was for situations like these, especially with storms and blackouts happening more often. But Karen wasn't backing down. She kept insisting that the noise was unbearable and that it was affecting her family's peace. It was like no one wanted to see the bigger picture. What made things worse was the neighborhood gossip. Some neighbors supported Karen, saying the generator was too loud and that I should have warned them first. Others quietly nodded in my favor, knowing how essential emergency preparedness really is. But the tension was building, and the atmosphere was thick with frustration on both sides. Everyone was waiting to see what the police would decide. Would they make me shut down the generator, or would they understand why it needed to run? Meanwhile, I kept thinking about the bigger issue here. How do we balance being good neighbors with being prepared for emergencies? And why did a simple generator cause such a huge clash? The conflict wasn't just about noise anymore. It was about respect, understanding, and how we handle emergencies together. And even as the police talked to Karen and me, the real question was still hanging in the air. Could this situation get resolved without making things worse? The story was far from over, and the next move could change everything. The officers looked back and forth between Karen and me, clearly trying to figure out what to do next. The air was thick with tension. Everyone was waiting for that moment when a decision would be made. I could feel Karen's eyes burning into me, like she wanted to win this battle no matter what. She started raising her voice, pointing out every little thing about the generator's noise, making it sound like I was deliberately causing chaos in the neighborhood. But I knew she didn't understand what was really at stake. My mind raced, trying to find the right words to explain why this generator wasn't just some noisy machine, but a lifeline during emergencies. I wanted the officers to see that I wasn't being careless. I was being responsible. But Karen's complaints were loud and insistent, and it felt like the story was twisting in a way I hadn't expected. The neighbors were watching, some whispering to each other, some shaking their heads, all waiting to see how this would end. Then, as the conversation got more heated, I noticed something unexpected. Some neighbors started stepping in, trying to explain what they knew about emergency preparedness. A few even mentioned how important it was to have backup power during blackouts. That moment gave me a glimmer of hope, but Karen wasn't about to give up. She was digging in deeper, making it clear she wanted action taken right now. The officers exchanged looks, and I could tell they were struggling with what to do. Would they make me turn off the generator? Would Karen get what she wanted? Or was there a chance they'd see this whole thing differently once the full picture was clear? The tension was almost unbearable, and everyone seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next move that could change everything. This was the turning point, and I knew the fallout from it would affect more than just me and Karen. It could change how the whole neighborhood dealt with emergencies moving forward. But the answer wasn't coming easy, and the suspense was killing me. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, the officers suddenly mentioned that they had received another complaint from the homeowner down the street. I hadn't even heard about this until that moment. Apparently, my generator's noise had reached further than I realized, and someone else was upset enough to call the police too. That was a surprise no one saw coming, and it instantly raised the stakes. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down harder. This wasn't just a disagreement between Karen and me anymore. It was turning into a neighborhood-wide issue. The emergency backup system I relied on for safety was now being seen by some as a public nuisance. And that fear of power loss that had made me install the generator suddenly felt like it might backfire. Would everyone soon be against me? Would this backlash make me regret even trying to be prepared? Karen's smug smile told me she was ready to use this new complaint as ammo, pushing the officers to take stronger action. Meanwhile, I was stuck wondering how to convince them, and the community, that this generator was a necessity, not just an annoyance. The tension was reaching a boiling point, and I could tell the officers were struggling to balance between neighborhood peace and emergency preparedness. As the conversation went on, it became clear that this wasn't just about noise anymore. It was about trust, responsibility, and how people see what's important in times of crisis. I felt the whole neighborhood watching, waiting to see which side would come out on top. But little did I know, the real twist was yet to come, and it would turn this conflict upside down completely. Just as it seemed like things were about to spiral out of control, one of the officers asked if I could show them the paperwork for the generator. I pulled out the FEMA documentation and maintenance records I had carefully kept. The officer took a moment to review everything, and suddenly the tone shifted. He nodded and said that, based on the information, the generator was indeed part of an approved emergency backup system. That recognition brought some relief. I could tell the officers respected that I was prepared and following the rules. Karen, however, wasn't ready to back down. She argued that no matter the paperwork, the noise was still disrupting the neighborhood. But then something unexpected happened. Another neighbor, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. She shared how her family had suffered during previous blackouts and how having emergency power was essential, even if it wasn't perfect. Her words made others start to reconsider the situation. Slowly, the mood in the group shifted from confrontation to understanding. In the end, The officers decided not to make me shut down the generator, but suggested I try to minimize noise during certain hours. Karen reluctantly agreed, though you could still see the frustration in her eyes. Just when I thought we'd reach some sort of peace, the final twist hit. The power went out again, harder and longer than before. This time, everyone realized just how critical emergency preparedness really is. The generator hummed steadily, no longer just my backup, but a lifeline for the entire neighborhood. And in that moment, the conflict that seemed so huge before started to fade into something much bigger. A community learning to come together when it mattered most. But what happened next? Well, that's a story for another time. After the second power outage, things finally started to change in the neighborhood. People saw firsthand how important having an emergency backup system really was. Even Karen, who had been so upset before, had to admit that the generator was helping keep everyone safe and comfortable. It wasn't perfect. There was still some noise. But it was clear that being prepared for emergencies was more important than quiet comfort. Over the next few days, neighbors came by to ask questions about the generator, wanting to know how they could get their own emergency backup systems. What started as a tense conflict turned into a conversation about community safety and responsibility. We all realized that sometimes misunderstandings happen when people don't have the full story. This whole experience taught me something valuable. Being prepared isn't just about having the right tools. It's about communicating and helping others understand why those tools matter. Karen and I didn't become best friends overnight, but we found common ground in knowing that emergencies affect us all. So if you're thinking about emergency preparedness, don't wait. Having a reliable backup system can make all the difference when disaster strikes. And remember, sometimes the biggest challenges bring people together in unexpected ways.